Good morning once again, everyone. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Steve Fisher from Citi, and I shall be the moderator on this morning's panel on the macroeconomic and financial situation of Ukraine. We have 5 distinguished speakers today. First, before I introduce our speakers, I will briefly summarize some of the topics that we would like to discuss in any particular order. The first topic will be our speaker's evaluation of the financial and economic policies of Ukraine as we have them right now. The second topic will be what are the growth points in the Ukrainian economy, the positive and the negative aspects. Where do we see economic potential and investment attractiveness, in what regions in Ukraine? The third point that we would like to talk about today is what is the cooperation in Ukraine between the Ukrainian government and the international financial institutions, and the cooperation of the international financial institutions and the private sector? How effective are these programs that the IFIs are providing to the country and to the private sector? The fourth topic we'd like to talk about is the efficiency of banks, their credit portfolios, the efficiency of bank financing in today's market, and finally, a good summary of what is the foreign investment situation in a variety of sectors in Ukraine today. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. Sitting next to me is Charles Chat Kilbourne. He's the Senior Advisor and Secretary of the Corporation of FSVC, which stands for Financial Services Volunteer Corps out of the United States. So welcome.
Thank
Chat,
you.
how are you? And next to him is Olexandr Savchenko, Director of the Institute for International Business in Ukraine. And sitting next to Olexandr is Jean-Jacques Soulacrop, the Senior Corporate Banker based in Luxembourg at the European Investment Bank, a bank that has invested billions of dollars into the country up to now. And sitting next to Jean-Jacques is our favorite central bank representative, Serhiy Nikolaychuk, who is Director of the Monetary Policy Department of the Central Bank and Economic Analysis. So here is our panel today. We have summarized a few of the topics that we would like to cover, and I think it might be interesting to get a black and white view of the situation, the economic situation in Ukraine. And perhaps we should start with the central bank itself. Serhiy, perhaps you could give us an idea of what's the current situation in the economy and what is the central bank paying attention to?
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Today I replace this conference Dmitry Soulacrop, who is currently in charge with the negotiation, final stage of negotiation with the IMF on negotiation of the recovery program. And talking about the current situation in Ukraine and policies of the NBU. Actually, I very like the topic of this conference, New Ukraine. Yeah. And as this topic suggests, our economy is going through dramatic changes, and so do the policies of the National Bank of Ukraine. And maybe the main very important change which happened during the last 2 years, that is the exit from the fixed exchange rate regime, so the regime which used by the central bank for many years, and regime which led to accumulation of many mismatches in the economy. And of course, this transition was not easy. Actually, it was this transition actually was a result of a classic balance of payment or currency crisis in the Ukraine, and after that we also have a set of negative events in the country. Just to mention military conflict, huge deterioration of terms of trade, additional trade restrictions from our main trading partner in the past. And but as the situation shows, the current macroeconomic situation, the situation on FX market shows, households, business have been getting used to live in the conditions of floating exchange rate.
And currently, neither business nor households react so dramatically as crazy to any change in the exchange rate. And exchange rate pass-through to prices became much lower compared with the turbulent times in the beginning of the previous year in 2014. And at the same time, exchange rate dynamics helps economy to adjust to change in the external and internal environment. And like the example, yes, when the terms of trade continue to deteriorate, when steel prices, our main commodity, fell significantly during 2015, in the beginning of 2016, when additional trade restrictions were implemented by Russia. So the gradual devaluation of the exchange rate helped the economy to adjust and to continue to recover. At the same time, when the situation improved on the global markets, when steel prices rebound, when Ukrainian exporters get the access to Asian countries again through Russian territory. In such situation, of course, it was necessary to adjust exchange rate to appreciation side. And of course, such dynamics is very important in our intentions to implement inflation targeting. So for many years, the National Bank of Ukraine declared its transition to inflation targeting. But frankly speaking, only a year, 2 years ago, the strong political will appeared, and the central bank really showed the intention to lower inflation to reasonable numbers. And last year, the board approved monetary policy strategy for 2016-2020 with clear inflation targets, 12% this year, 8% next year, and achieving 5% in medium term in 2019 and further. And so also roadmap for implementation for the transition to this regime was developed and currently is under implementation. And this roadmap and corresponding action plan consists of a few areas like institutional arrangement, decision-making process, analytical support, operational design of monetary policy, communications, development of financial markets, and infrastructure needed for successful implementation of monetary policy. And in order to achieve our inflation targets, so during the last year, the monetary policy stance of the NBU remained very tight. And it was necessary stance because of very high inflation. All of you know that in the April of 2015, inflation reached 61%. But again, such high, very tight stance of the monetary policy, together with all other factors such as tight fiscal policy and quite favorable dynamics on food prices, so led us to have very fast disinflation. Currently, inflation in Ukraine is lower than 10%. Of course, we expect further impact from administrative prices hikes for heating, for gas, and so on. And for the end of the year, we still think that 12% target is achievable. And again, so such inflation dynamics is again is the sign of the serious efforts of the National Bank of Ukraine to achieve its inflation targets and to return its credibility. Also, if we talk about different components, I would like also to highlight the change in the operational design of our monetary policy. Yeah. We started this process actually last year and finalized it during the last monetary policy committee, which took place in April, when our discount rate, key policy rate, the euro was converged with our real, the euro de facto policy rate on 2 weeks CDs. And currently we have very clear structure of our operational design. So we have the key policy rate, we have the corridor of standing facilities with interest rates on overnight loans and deposit operations. And we are going to use this instrument as the main tool for monetary policy implementation. Of course, all these efforts also supported by the reforms in other areas. First of all, I'm talking about the banking system, banking system reform. Compared with other years, with the crisis of 2008, 2009, this time NBU took uncompromising stance towards insolvent banks, engineering a major banking system clean-up, and NBU continues to make steady progress also in implementing banking sector strategy to rehabilitate the banking sector and restore confidence, restore lending. Maybe I will stop here on this point, and after that we'll answer on questions about our policies.
Serhiy, I am sure you will be getting questions about your policies today, so without further ado, we'll leave some time for question and answers. By the way, logistically, we'll finish this session at 12 o'clock, which is 15 minutes later than scheduled, and then we'll move to the Agro Committee schedule that'll start at 12, and then lunch will be at 1. So we'll try to stick close to the original schedule. Well, Mr. Savchenko, what do you think about all of these central bank policies? I'm interested what a leading think tank working in Ukraine thinks about the central bank's policies.
Thank you very much. I prepared my short speech in Ukrainian, and I hope it will be understandable and translation will be good. Is it okay?
Sure.
And everybody is ready for switch on. Okay.
На то, чтобы слушать перевод. I'm going to start with corruption issues. And we are combating corruption in Ukraine. We're fighting with corruption, but corruption is problem number 2. Top problem in Ukraine is populism. And what can I say? Actually, populism and corruption interact with each other. The more populism, the more corruption we have. And even it's more related to the strong impact of the government and national bank regulation. The more the government and the state regulates, including regulations of the national bank, the more they interfere into economic processes, the more corruption we face, and economic growth declines. Actually, we don't have growth, we have decline. So that's the basic foundation. And these are the messages to our government to make sure they improve the situation. And now I'm going to talk about concrete and specific things, because we don't have people from Ministry of Finance, only 2 bullet points. What have to be done? Right now, when government is changing, and it always happens, everybody is trying to change the tax system. And that's a grave mistake. It's a big mistake. Our tax system is changing, and we are amending it 2-3 times annually. And it used to be chaotic, and it's still chaotic. We have to start. We have to limit our government expenditures. Government spending have to be limited. And in Ukraine, if we are taking into account pension fund, we are at the level of Germany. We have to be like Poland and Turkey. And what it means, the pension fund have to be, in comparison with GDP, have to be reduced by the factor of 2 times, and government spending have to be reduced by the factor of 10% from GDP. In case we'll succeed in this, this will mean that reforms have been started. Otherwise, it will be just show, pretending that we are doing some economic reforms. And because we don't have people from Ministry of Finance, I'm not going to dwell about it. Now I'm going to talk about National Bank of Ukraine, what Central Bank have to do. But before that, I have to assess the activities of the National Bank last year and this year. Do we see any progress in this respect? And I can tell you that we can see some improvement. And I'm hopeful about it. And now, pretty straightforward analysis. The functions of the basic functions of the banking system. And I'll assess, just actually evaluate. 0 means very bad assessment, very bad situation, and 5, very good. How it was done last year and this year. And basic functions of the monetary payments within the banking system. How quickly it is done, how reliable it is, and how expensive are the services. This is very important to investors, external and internal.
It is both about payments in foreign currency and domestic currency. Prior to the crisis, our payment system had rank 5, top score. Right now, last year I would put 2 points only, which is very poor. And I just want to make an example for you. For the small business to make foreign currency payments, sometimes it takes from 5 to 10 working days. As for the costs, I'm only taking the Exim Bank, the state-owned bank. If anybody wants from small and medium business to make a transaction or wire transfer the money from a deposit account to another bank, you need to pay 5% off your total payment value. Just for you to realize how the banking system works currently. So I would put 2 points for the last year and 3 points for now, which is satisfactory. There is some progress, but is still not sufficient enough. And I'd like to say that the 3 points that I'm giving right now is actually not allowing the economy to function for the growth. It is actually not satisfactory for both the business and the entire economy. As for the deposits, the progress in the deposits, their reliability, the positive interest rates, the deposit rates should be more than the inflation rate, and the liquidity. You can withdraw your deposits or place your deposits. Last year, unfortunately, I would put 0, so the lowest ranking possible. The deposits deteriorated both in the domestic and in the foreign currency. It was a catastrophic drop of deposits last year at around 18 to 20%, plus or minus, as it's hard to estimate. This year, the situation is a little bit better. I would put 2 points for this year, and this is already better. So the function of retaining and accumulating resources for the business is doing much better, and it's one of the merits of the central bank, and it is not sufficient still for the economic growth. As for the loans, the lending dynamics and the rates, again, from 0 last year and 1, I would put 1 for this year now. Why? Loans have been already in crisis. In case I I spoke about deposits and the correlation with the inflation rates, then in absolute figures, lending is also deteriorating at around 18 to 20% last year. I just want to add, just for your understanding, Mr. Fisher said it very right. If foreign direct investment drops, as well as lending, then of course the economy and GDP may not grow and will not grow because we program the economy to deteriorate. So this year the economic growth progress at around 1 to 2% is obviously possible. At least if lending grows by 2 or 3%, the question is whether foreign direct investment comes in or not. So hopefully it is a yes. The amounts will be not very significant, but still there will be some. As for the foreign exchange, unfortunately, this function is very important for the Ukrainian banking system. Nowhere else in the entire world anybody would take as much care of the exchange rate as we do. But this is a cult in this country, which is one of the key functions of the banking system, obviously. This is the bank's margin, how much banks want for the exchange, arbitration opportunities when you can buy foreign currency and then sell it and make money on it. Arbitration is always an opportunity to have several different exchange rates, and also the gray market in the foreign exchange. Foreign currency exchange. This function I would evaluate last year at 1 point in terms of the banking system's performance, and I would put 2 points for this year. Why? Because there is an arbitration opportunity. There are several exchange rates available. The bank's margin in some of the transactions, especially cash transactions, sometimes is reaching 2 or 3% sometimes. This is inappropriate for the sober banking system. That's why I would give an advice to the central bank to take the key functions that any banking system has to do and keep eyes open and at least get to 3 or 4 points across all the parameters. This will give an opportunity for the business and investors to work much better, because right now they're not really willing to do this. Now very shortly about my own assessment of the National Bank's performance in terms of the monetary policy tools. And this is a big progress here. I made my own study and I came to the conclusion that the central bank is really apt to get involved in very active monetary and exchange policy. It is capable of refinancing, it is capable of the interest rates. It can also work with the reserves and deposits. However, it is not taking advantage of all the available tools. And this is another advice to the National Bank to get much more involved in using monetary tools in its arsenal. Not to revisit the exchange rate or interest rates once per 6 months or once per a year, given our inflation-related fluctuations. It has to be done monthly, of course, with the forecasting involved. But last but not least, and probably one of the most important thing, is the responsibility of the National Bank. And here I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. In the modern world, the situation depends much more on the National Bank than on the government, luckily or unluckily. But I would still recommend to revisit the key or the core central bank's function, like they do in the United States. The central bank needs to pursue economic growth and new jobs by means of encouraging price and financial stability. It means the banks do not go bankrupt and the inflation is kept under control. Only then one can assess the central bank's performance as constructive, then I think we would never see such things as ban for the investors to reinvest their profits and also to actually repatriate them, their dividends and profits. And maybe the last point at this, actually this is another advice I would like to make to the National Bank of Ukraine. Stop trying to assess the banking control effectiveness by the number of banks that go bankrupt. Because with the bank's bankruptcy, the GDP is dropping down, inflation grows, and there are so many risks for devaluation. Because all the problems are actually covered by means of permissible emission through GDP monetization. The less bankrupt banks we have, the faster economic growth we will have. We need to get rid of this monetary narrowing policy and move to monetary expansion, which means we need to streamline our work towards economic growth, but not to actually make conservation of problems we have. And here I would like to stop at this point. Thank you.
Alexander, thank you. That was extremely interesting. That was a very detailed scorecard, and on that scorecard there were a few bad grades as well as some good grades, but very comprehensive review. I just want to mention one thing about banks being closed. My understanding, and I support this understanding, is the central bank in the last 18 months, the banks that they closed were either outright money laundering criminal banks or banks that, due to mismanagement, had to be closed. And I don't think that those banks that closed are going to be having a negative effect on the economy. I think they had a negative effect on the national treasury because they had to be resolved. But following up on that, I had to mention that because I think that is the reality. I would like to move it to America to chat. Financial Services Volunteer Corps, what do you think needs to be done after hearing this scorecard? And what are you involved in trying to do?
Thank you, Steve. Well, I'm on this panel. I am the least knowledgeable about Ukraine, so I will give you my perspective from where I sit at FSVC, and what FSVC does is build the capacity of financial sectors in emerging markets around the world by developing the core institutions, starting with central banks, including the other regulatory agencies, and when appropriate, commercial banks too. We have been in Ukraine in the past, in the 1990s and the 2000s, working very closely with the NBU on banking reform, supervision, development of the payment system, money laundering, corruption, NBU examiners. We set up a twinning relationship 15 or 20 years ago with the Federal Reserve in Washington, but we haven't been here since then. However, I will make some observations that I think are complementary to what we've discussed today. I thought the scorecard was fascinating. I would say, as a general rule, in any economy that is going through a major transition like we had in this country with the end of the Soviet Union, or is trying to establish itself as an emerging market, that your foundation institutions are essential. They have to work. They have to work before anything else good is going to happen. And so here, I think that Ukraine should focus on that. The central bank is up and running and functional, but it certainly could be stronger. There are other institutions here, like the National Securities stock market, that's barely functional at all. It has almost no capacity. The securities markets are scattered all over the place. So I think that we should be talking mostly about institutional development here. Just thinking for a minute. The scorecard was quite something. I would be concerned here about the commercial banking sector also, for two reasons. The commercial banking sector dominates the financial sector. I think something like 92 or 93% of the transactions go through. Is that right, Steve?
I'm not sure of the exact statistic.
Even more.
Even more. Okay.
Capital market does not exist, unfortunately.
So, I mean, on two scores here, I would make a priority of building the capacity of the regulatory institutions. I would look at that as something that needed to be done whole scale. But I would want the state-run commercial banks to have an entirely new governance structure. I would want to have a new leadership team put in there. I would look toward privatizing them, moving them into a position where they are properly functioning commercial banks that circulate money. I would be very aggressive about developing the non-bank financial institution sector. I would be very aggressive about making sure the regulators knew how to handle that. And what I mean by that is that the regulators know how to engage with non-bank financial institutions so that they move money, so that it actually generates the movement of capital to small and medium-sized businesses. I think that small and medium-sized businesses here are starved for money, and there's great opportunity in this country for them to grow if they could get it. So I would be pushing the regulators to develop their capacity there, and I would be trying to push out of the commercial banking sector into a more nuanced, developed, and complete financial sector writ large. I'm noticing the time. I will stop there to allow for our last commentator to speak, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Chat. We'll move on to Jean-Jacques. Now, Jean-Jacques represents billions of dollars from the EU via European Investment Bank flowing into this country. And you work very closely with the government. You've heard the speakers today. What's EIB's view of the situation in Ukraine, and what are you doing to support the positive trends and to highlight the negative trends?
Thank you, Stephen. Let me first start with a very interesting experience I had yesterday evening during this very nice welcoming event, reception. I was talking to people and discussing, as we all do, about what you are doing and so on and so forth. I was explaining what the European Investment Bank is. And it was very striking to see that nobody knew about the European Investment Bank, up to a point where someone told me, oh, you are then a subsidiary of the EBRD. Oh, wow, okay, we have a situation there. So it was very enlightening, in fact, a very nice experience, because then I was thinking to myself, how come my institution, being the world's largest multilateral financial institution, and being twice as big as the World Bank, how come we are so unknown? And how come that we are lending $1 billion a year for the last 3 years to Ukraine? And how come we are not totally unknown? This is very interesting, and I was thinking about that for the whole evening, and I came up with a conclusion that is very simple. We have been lending mostly to the public sector. We have been lending to the government and also the sub-sovereign governments. About 60% of our loans are with the public sector, mostly in transport, energy, energy efficiency, and this is not visible. This is not necessarily what people can feel and see, even though it's a necessary investment. I don't have to make the demonstration that public investments are the backbone of economic development, but still, it's not very sexy. It's not very visible. The other 40% of our portfolio is in supporting what we call the small and medium enterprises, but we don't do it directly. We do it through intermediaries, banks mostly. That represent, for example, last year we signed a 400 million loan with the government on lend to local banks to target the agriculture sector, agricultural SMEs. That's very nice, but it's invisible as well. But there is still the third leg of our activity that is completely missing. In fact, what we want to do is to target the private sector, but not the SMEs. Now I'm talking about mid to large cap business. These big employers, these big companies who are struggling not to disinvest because borrowing is extremely expensive. So nowadays the private sector companies, the large ones, are simply stopping investing into their capex. So the adverse effect is that they are de facto disinvesting, and this is dramatic for the future. So this is what we want, this sector, these targets, we really want to work with these companies in order to support them and to become, symbolically visible and to show to the entire community, international community, that yes, there is business to do in Ukraine. we can support the big players, we can support the champions. Not only, and of course, this is the first target, the agribusiness sector, because it's export-oriented and there is a flow of revenues that is very interesting for as a banker. But I think this is not only, Ukraine is not only agribusiness. Ukraine, and I heard that this morning, is also avionics, it's also IT, it may be also biotechs. Why not? So we are here to develop this part of the activity and to become more visible, and in order to encourage the other bankers, the other financial institutions to increase their involvement here. This is our role. In fact, this is our objective, to be here when no one wants to be here. Everybody, when I talk about Ukraine to our equivalents, they all say, oh, Ukraine is too complicated, the situation is terrible. But again, when it comes to private sector, we believe that there is something to do. There are businesses, there is a support to be given to local businesses. Of course, our experience is that nothing is that rosy. You know, we heard about reforms this morning. This is fine and nice, but this is not the entire truth. The truth is that there are reforms, but it's not enough, of course. And also, there is a problem of capacity. When we have a portfolio of 4.3 billion euros with Ukraine, and that a significant, if not the vast majority of our portfolio is not disbursing, it means that there is a problem. In fact, the public sector is not implementing the money. We have huge sums of money sitting here without any activity. So what's happening? I think this is also a very critical element. Reform of the administration, but pragmatic one is extremely urgent. And then we would see some development. I'm more confident with the private sector, with private corporates, because when a corporate is borrowing, it's so expensive that they want to spend it immediately and to get a return immediately. But again, as an image, you can produce as much grain as you want. If you cannot transport it to the next port, then you are doomed. So both things are necessary. So this is how I see our intervention in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Jacques. Before we open this for questions and answers, what I'd like to do is ask each panelist rapid fire to give us the 2 top things they would like to see happen this year in order to see an improvement in the overall macroeconomic situation in the country. We'll start with my neighbor, Chet.
Okay, rapid fire. I hope I live up to that. I checked my notes. I jumped around a little bit to try to react to what the other speakers said. And what jumps out at me is you have a country that's got about 95% of its financial activity centralized in the commercial banking sector, but only 7% of the economy comprised of small and medium-sized businesses. So that's a big problem. That's a fundamental problem. If I were the supreme ruler of Ukraine for a year, I would start with that, and I would be aggressively moving to stand up the regulatory institutions necessary to diversify the economy.
Thank you very much for this question. First of all, dramatically cut public spending. It's minimum 10% of GDP. Then we will be in line with Poland, Turkey, and other successful economies. This is number one. Number two, real deregulation through cutting public civil officers, approximately 2-3 times. Everybody knows that productivity of labor, in particular in public sector, is very low in Ukraine. For example, if you compare our, let's say, national bank with a number of employees, by the way, it's quite a good reform. They cut 2 times, at least tried cut 2 times the number of employees of a national bank, but still much more should be done. And the second, it's liberalization in particular capital liberalization. Liberalization in a field of banking, investment, movement of capital. Without liberalization, we can't get substantial investment. Somebody rightly told that we need approximately 10% of GNP direct foreign investment. Last year it was minus. In good times, we done this figure, 10%, I remember, 10, 12 billion US dollars, not 10, but 5% definitely we had. And I stress liberalization is only one way to economic growth. Liberalization is the enemy of populism and bureaucracy. This is the way out.
Well, very interesting question. Again, I put myself into the shoes of the companies we have met, and quite a number now. And I would say the two most urgent things are first the foreign currency control and the capital control. Without those two things that are the lifelines of the companies, of your companies in your country, then you are killing the business, you are killing the economy. So this is, for me, in my point of view, these are the very two urgent things to address. I understand that the context does not allow it, but still, there should be some, intermediary solutions or agreements in order not to kill what is the most important in a country, the economic activity.
Thank you very much, and I should say that I agree completely with my two speakers before me that FX liberalization, maybe that's the most important task for the National Bank this year, and definitely I hope it will be done. Again, a lot of preconditions are already met for dramatic change in FX regulations, and currently we are waiting for successful recovery of the IMF program, and I hope that it will boost significant steps. And the second topic I would say maybe in my area, in monetary policy area, here I would be happy if inflation target for this year will be achievable, and maybe that's not I'm not talking about one number here to achieve the inflation at the end of the year. I'm not talking about the ensuring of inflation expectations and recovery of the credibility of the central bank in its anti-inflation policy. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. At this point in time, we have a few minutes for questions and answers. Do we have any questions from the audience? We do. Okay. Is there someone with a microphone around? She's coming. Okay.
Thank you. Serhiy, M&A partner of International Club Banker. My question for speaker, please tell about what you think about the reforming system in banking in Ukraine, because I know that in future investor from you tell about Turkey and other Asia and Arabic countries like to invest in Ukraine. What do you think about reforming law in Ukraine, because we haven't this law now, for example, for implement new finance instruments like Islamic banking, etc. Thank you.
Maybe, would you like to take that, sir?
Okay, so the main idea of the overall reform of the banking system, that's the create banking system which will really enhance the economic growth in the country. I don't think that the banking system we had in the past was really the instrument for stimulation of the economic growth, yeah, and for effective redistribution of financial resources. So mostly it was just the system how to use the money from households, from population, in order to finance the business of the owners of the banks. And at the same time, a lot of banks just do their business not very properly in line with the legislation. So I don't think that's really the system we would like to have in order to enhance the potential of the country. And the current reforms in this area, so which are directed to decrease of related party ownership, reforms related to increase of increase in responsibility of owners and management of the banks. So the reforms directed to resolution of NPLs and so on. So that's the right steps actually in providing incentives for banking system to do right things.
A question up front.
Hi, my name is Ilya Timchenko. I'm the senior business reporter at Kyiv Post. I wanted to more focus on the SMEs in Ukraine, and at the Kyiv Post we're noticing more and more of a trend where, in talking with small business representatives and big business representatives, it seems that the main pressure is going on the SMEs, and because, I mean, of course, with the big businesses and with the corporate banks, of course, they're having problems as well, but they always either have connections or they can speak one way or another with high government officials, and they can find their ways out. But for SMEs, they're always having problems, and they again and again say how it's difficult for them to grow further. They reach a point and then they can't grow further. Either they have pressure from government officials, or they don't have acceptable financing, or the interest rates are high. So my question is to the NBU is, what specific steps do you have in order to help SMEs? And because many times the rhetoric is we're helping all the economy, but usually the focus is more on the big businesses. So that's the first question. Second question is, we're very thankful for providing the names of the bank owners, et cetera. We think that's a great step forward, but also, can you also make it more transparent on what basis you provide the capitalization to specific banks, and why don't you provide the capitalization to other banks? Thank you.
Okay, maybe I will start with the second question. NBU does not provide any capitalization to the banks. So we just have the standard operations on providing liquidity for the banks which are considered to be solvent. Of course, during the crisis time, some stabilization loans on more long-term were provided, yeah. But at the same time, the overall during the last year and a half, actually, this volume of these loans has been decreased significantly, about 15 or 20 billion hryvnia, something like that. Talking about the support of SMEs. I don't think I can speak on some specific project. I'm not involved in this business yet, but talking from the monetary policy perspective, I think that very important what we do now is the creating a stable macroeconomic environment with low and stable inflation. And I think that's especially important for small and medium-sized enterprises, because usually these enterprises suffer mostly from high and unpredicted inflation and from instability on a fixed market.
Maybe I can add a few words about support to SMEs. This is a very interesting question. In fact, as you said, SMEs with large corporates are complementary. In fact, we are talking about the same problem with a full spectrum of size. What we are doing is that when we lend to a bank to on-lend our money to SMEs, they basically benefit from our very super competitive prices, so which are the very low interest rate, and the banks, the commercial banks, will have to pass on this effect to the SMEs. So this is already one thing that we can do to support SMEs. The other thing is that when I say SME, it goes from 1 million euro up to 25 million euros of loan. So we are talking about a very big range. In fact, we are targeting almost up to the mid-cap companies. So when I'm talking about large corporates, for corporates that can borrow more than 25 million euros. So I think we are covering this spectrum. And the second advantage that we are giving usually is that we are giving long-term loans. We are not giving the 1 year or 2 years, OPEX kind of financing. We are really in for new investments. And the way we do it is that we work with these local banks, and we monitor, in fact, on a very regular basis what's going on, to what we agree up front with the partners, the local partners, which sector we would target, and then we monitor it. So each and every decision is reviewed on our side from Luxembourg, from headquarters, and to see if everything is in line. And of course, we do the usual monitoring of the whole thing.
Thanks. This is very right question. SME is a huge problem. Really now, small and medium enterprises basically unable to get any credit, any finance. Huge shortage of finance. When I used to be director of EBRD, and I'm very proud, I developed the 300 euro SME credit line. It was 94 and we spent this whole credit line for micro and small credits, and the share of unperformed credit was just less than 1%. Right now, taking into account the huge deficit, my proposal, for example, to open credit line for each international finance organization, EBRD $500 million, IFC $500 million. Thank you very much, European Investment Bank. Basically, according to my calculation, our small business need 2-3 billion finance each year. Now they have zero support. And I don't agree that all credit, small credit, micro credit, 1 million should be checked in Brussels. In my time, we create, with the National Bank, group of very experienced local bankers. They check Ukrainian banks, and these Ukrainian banks basically allocate very successfully money to SME. And the second my proposal, what should be done is a speed corporatization of our two state banks, Ashadny Bank and Exim Bank. Corporatization and 20-30% privatization. Firstly, with participation of international finance organization, and then real private investment. Under such condition, I believe the credit should be renovated in Ukraine, may be renovated. Because right now I can't see any possibility for real economic growth. For Ukraine, the real economic growth more than 10%, because we are very small, very tiny country. Any investment of 100 million is 1% growth in Ukraine right now. This is the situation.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we're going to now move to our next panel because we have limited time. But I trust that, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard a lot of analysis and a lot of concrete suggestions about what needs to be done next to address the macroeconomic situation in the country. On behalf of the Empire State Capitol, I would like to thank all of our panelists today. So thank you, gentlemen.